What's up, guys? Happy Tuesday. Andrew and Bobby with you to break down week 2 of the CFL. And we're happy to be doing these videos on Tuesdays to get ahead of the early lines. And as we saw last week, so much movement in the market as expected. But Bobby, happy Tuesday, man. How did you feel about week 1?
First couple of games, I'm glad I wasn't really on. But Saturday, Sunday was a pretty good day for us. If you get on the lines early enough, or the lines, not the Lions. But even last minute, those even Argos plus 3.5, I think it closed. You're still laughing, even though you shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean the numbers, and for me, I got involved. I get involved a little more than you do as far as volume, but I try and figure it out which plays I like the most. And I was happy to hit the big one. And the big one for me, now an 11-2 record dating back to last year with the big one. Saskatchewan comes through. What was it? A 21-point fourth quarter. I mean, with the way week 1 was going, it was nice to have a team turn things around like that. And I think they're even better than what they showed. I mean, that was probably a game that they got fortunate to come out with. But little recap here: 27-12 Montreal, 32-24 Calgary over Hamilton. Saskatchewan, the game I just mentioned, 29-21, and of course Toronto outright upsetting the BC Lions 35-27. So underdogs go 4-0 ATS. As I used to say, week 1 in the CFL used to be dogs and unders. This week, dogs go 4-0 to the point spread, except for we saw 3-1 as far as the overs are concerned. So it was dogs and overs as far as week 1. Do you think that can continue? And obviously it's overreaction week. Which team are you the most surprised by their disappointing week 1?
Well, I think the easy one is Winnipeg. Like, they couldn't move the ball at all. A lot of that is Montreal has a great defense, but I don't even think either one of those teams was that good. Montreal capitalized on a fumble. They had Winnipeg take some stupid penalties to extend drives, but they did take advantage. So props to them, I guess. I don't think Winnipeg is going to be this bad for that long. And the other thing that came out of that game was the K ball. I didn't even know that these balls were chipped, and some people were talking about bruising from how big the chips were in them. I like in 2024, it's hard to imagine that. I don't know what genius is putting these chips in the balls, but Sergio Castillo, all of a sudden he's missing field goals. And sure, it's CFL, so he missed 2 field goals and an extra point and only cost his team 4 points. But that could have been an edge going forward in terms of maybe the totals might have been inflated by a few points for the first few weeks. But it seems like the CFL was on top of it right away. And I don't know why any kicker, if they have the option now, would be using those. So the rest of the weekend, those missed extra points was just a standard CFL kicking.
Yeah. I thought that was a pretty cool story. It was kind of weird. I mean, we're still trying to grow the game, right? Like every year, the CFL is trying to capture more audiences, whether it's south of the border or whoever. And then, of course, you see something come out like that, and pretty much every kicker complaining about it. And I'm happy, like you said, to see them address it immediately. I put out a video Friday morning talking about it and just kind of reading out the article from 3 Down Nation, just shocked. It's like, come on, guys. I mean, you can't change things. And especially the fact that they're saying it doesn't really change much for the quarterbacks passing the ball, but it certainly changes something for the rotation of the ball as far as kicking it. Why do they have to make a change? And of course, was that in his head? That's also one thing we could say. Was it a mental thing? Was it in his head? Who knows? But for a point spread that was hovering around the 7 mark throughout the week, if you think about it, he missed 2 field goals and an extra point. That's 7 points right there. Obviously, you mentioned with the way the CFL works, he ended up getting some of those back. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit. To me, the biggest shocker to me was the receiving core. Wolotarski, 33 yards, Dembski, 27 yards, and Lawler got injured, but with 26 yards. Obviously, we talk about Zach Collaros, but the receiving core didn't look great. I said to you last week, I said, can Montreal just continue to turn the ball or create turnovers? And of course, can we really count it as a Montreal turnover if a punt returner on Winnipeg fumbles? Does that still get to count as a Montreal, turnover? I don't know, but how much on the other side of things? How much were you impressed with Montreal? Even though we can definitely both agree it was a bad game for Winnipeg.
Yeah, I still don't think they're the best team in the CFL. I think they're still pretty good. I upgraded them after that win. You had to, but I don't know. As a number, I kind of stayed away from, and seeing how bad the Winnipeg offense was, I think that's basically what you can sum up that score to. I don't think Montreal's offense is making any big difference right now. It's mostly defense, and like you said last week, and we were proven wrong in week 1. But you can't be relying on turnovers and stupid penalties to extend your drives or even put you in good field position. So I'm high. I'm not as high in Montreal as everybody else is, but I'm not saying that they're a bottom half team or anything either.
And it'll, of course, be back-to-back games for them against teams in the West Division this week, taking on Edmonton. Calgary, Hamilton, any quick thoughts? 32 points for Calgary. Look, I did end up playing a small 1% wager on Hamilton first half money line, and I had under 47 in that game. So I took 2 losses in that game. And for everybody watching that follows me on X Daily or YouTube, this is going to be about transparency. Like, we're going to celebrate the wins, talk about the losses each week. It's all part of it. And, it's last year, the closing line value, if you had it in the CFL, you usually were on the wrong side. But I don't think that's going to happen back-to-back years. But I'll tell you what, I felt pretty good when I saw 44.5 as a total pre-game. And I'm sitting there in my pocket with a 47 as my under, and the game gets to the 50s. It seemed like it was kind of a reckless game out there, Bobby. And I thought that, to me, Calgary looked like a team that had a lot more confidence and proved a lot of people wrong. But how many more times this year are they going to get in the 30s? I'm not sure. A lot of times.
Well, I thought it was pretty impressive. And I don't know if you said this on our broadcast last week, but you said it to me when we were chatting before. But Jake Maier is a field goal machine. He can turn great drives into field goals like nobody else, and they still managed to punch a few in here. So he had a great game up until last year. He was the most accurate quarterback of all time, I think, in the history of the CFL, doing his dinking and dunking for his first year after Bo Levi. Maybe they don't stink as much as everybody thought they would. Again, like how that was a tough game to see go over. You would think that these 2 quarterbacks, they both struggled last year, but looks like Maier's worked on his game at least and had a great one for the first week. And even Bo Levi Mitchell, I don't think he played that bad either. There were a lot of pretty brutal drops, which I wouldn't expect to continue throughout the year. So I think I'd be optimistic for, even if you're Hamilton, even after losing that game, I think you still have a great chance, especially in the East.
I'm looking at the numbers here, and sometimes I find these hard to believe. This is from footballdb.com. Hamilton, after week 1, number 1 in total yards, 459. Calgary at number 3 with 363. And BC at number 2 with 371. Only one of those teams won last week, and that was the team in third. Is that not just the CFL for you, with the 2 and outs and how it can work? Like, it seems to me like, and this is why more than any other year, and it also comes with it being more widely available with the props, I look forward to making money with the props this year. I only ended up releasing 1 to clients. It was Tyson Philpott. He went over. He had that huge, like, 70-yard catch, which we didn't even really need a play like that, but that was kind of the icing on the cake. But I thought that was pretty interesting to bring up, the fact that 363 total yards there, Calgary. Passing yards, 246 compared to Hamilton, 303. Like you said about Hamilton, that you weren't really disappointed, right? With Bo. I mean, the guy had 300 some yards. He looked okay. I think they might be an over team. Is their defense weak? Because, again, you don't want to overreact. Week 2 is known as overreaction week, and I get it. But the big thing I had circled from that game was Sure, Jake Mayer played well. Sure, some of these guys played well. Hamilton's defense didn't look good.
No, it didn't. And if you're giving a team like the Stamps, who are expected to be bottom of the East or bottom of the West for sure, bottom in the CFL, some people would argue, you're giving letting them put up a performance like that on you, I wouldn't be too happy about that. They lost a couple key players in the offseason, but it's early. I think that new coaching staff has plenty of time to turn things around at least.
It's funny to me just looking at Calgary. Like they gave out the most yards in in week 1, 459. The next team was Toronto with 371, and yet Calgary ended up winning their game, put up 30 something points. Like you try and look for fade indicators, and a lot of these numbers tell me like 459. Like how can they put up 30 points, win a game in week 1, but they gave up the most total yards, rushing yards? Hamilton looked really good. Butler. So I'm curious. Anyway, we'll get into week 2 here shortly, but Saskatchewan and Edmonton, you and I were happy to have Saskatchewan cash that ticket. Took a really good second half. Any quick thoughts on that game?
Up until the fourth quarter, it was a pretty brutal game. I think the live total was around 30, 31, 32. You didn't know who was the worst team going into that fourth quarter. Last year, I think a lot of the media fell for the Elks, overrating them. So I don't think it was that much of a shock of how this game ended. Elks still aren't a good team. And like I said, chatting with you, I don't think MBT is the savior that a lot of people have made him out to be. The line itself, it opened 3.5, got below 3, and then it kind of held throughout the week. But by game time, I was able to get an Edmonton +1. So like Saskatchewan came all the way through and was favored by kickoff in some books. So it seems like lots of money on the Riders, and relatively lots of money. So not a good game for the books for sure.
Yeah, that one really moved throughout the week, and I was trying to be happy about it at least, but then at one point I wasn't very happy about it, seeing in the third quarter, and then we needed that big fourth quarter to come through. A big talking point for me, and a big reason why I liked the Riders, as you know, was because of their run game. Also, a healthy Trevor Harris, 305 yards was nice, but AJ Ouellette, he averaged 1.8 yards per carry. I mean, you got to think it's can only get better from there. In their matchup coming here in week 2, but 1.8 yards. This guy had 18 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown. The game plan was, we saw it. The game plan, they went to him. They gave him all the touches he needs. And I hope they do the exact same thing in week 2, week 3. But to me, that was really important because even though it wasn't really working, they were establishing the run game. Sean Bain Jr., 8 targets, 5 receptions, 125 yards, 3 touchdowns, 38 yards after the catch. I mean, to me, I think it's a little bit worrisome that they weren't able to get a lot going until the fourth quarter when they had some of these stats like they had. Like, this is one of those things where I've analytically in the NHL, expected goals, right? You see like a team that's expected to score 5 goals like the Oilers were in game 1, but they didn't score any. To me, this is one of those ones where it's kind of a bet on, because I saw AJ Ouellette 18 carry opportunities, turns it into 32. I think he's only going to do better. You look at some of these guys with 10 targets, 8 targets, so many opportunities, I think. So if you look at it, sure, the game plan and things started to come together in the fourth quarter, but I feel like maybe how they played for the first 3 quarters didn't necessarily reflect on the field. Would you say? I don't know. I feel like Saskatchewan almost deserved better throughout the game. Some people would call us lucky maybe for having an explosive fourth quarter, but I still think Saskatchewan deserved the win. Would you agree, or did we get a little bit lucky?
No, I think the Riders were the right side. There's just a lot of there's a lot of luck in it too, right? When you only have 2 chances at moving the ball until you got to punt it away, you're more susceptible to a couple bad throws having a big impact on your game. I wouldn't say that Edmonton was the better team. Um, and probably the score reflects how the game should have been. Um, Saskatchewan was moving at a fair amount and then kind of stalling at around midfield. So, yeah, I think the Riders were the right side of that bet. I think the over was maybe a lucky win based on how those first three quarters went.
Yeah.
But in terms of the side, I don't think we were on the wrong side of that one for sure.
I thought about wearing my Justin McGinnis jersey after the game he had, but they didn't get a win, so I'll save that for coming off a victory. BC and Toronto. I mean, talk about line movement. It came down, came down. Plus 5.5 was my free play at Wager Talk. I didn't want to give it out as a release because I just felt horrible about that number, you know. And for people that listen to me on the shows I did throughout the week, they got behind it, but actually on game day, I ended up jumping in on the over. And the more I looked at it, the more I liked it, the more I liked the, I still felt like there was some disrespect towards Dukes. And I think the offense was good. And you look towards BC's defense, how it played probably the last 4, 5, 6 weeks of last year, including the divisional final against Winnipeg. I kind of had question marks about them overall. You know, expectations of moving forward about BC, but also your thoughts on the performance in week one.
Yeah, BC's defense. I don't know. Was there a worse performance this week? I don't think so. And they struggled late last year, like you said, letting players like Dustin Crum or Taylor Powell put up 30, 40 points on them. Like you said, this line, like it would have been great to have it at that 7.5 open, like we grabbed, but like I still liked it at the 5.5. I was a little distracted that day, so I'm glad I didn't see that 3.5. Otherwise, I would have jumped and kind of tried for a second middle there. But I wouldn't overreact too much. Like Toronto's defensive line is easily, I would say, the best in the league. BC has struggled to protect VA. Even last year, like we both eat at the same spot, so I see him in town once in a while, and he was walking fairly gingerly at the end of last year after getting beat up for the last few weeks. So hopefully, for the Lions' sake and for his, they can figure this out, get some cohesion on that line. But it's tough to be one of the best teams in the league when you're giving up that much pressure on every play. So that's something they need to work on, and they should be able to figure it out pretty quickly, or else they're in trouble in the West. There's a lot of good teams in the West.
Big time. I think everybody around them got better, and I don't always listen to the CFL panel. A lot of times I'll change the channel at halftime. I don't like listening to the pregame even. I'm superstitious about that because I'm so deep into my own research and my own thoughts that I enjoy talking to you and other CFL bettors. But when I listen to the CFL panel too much, I don't want their opinions to get into my head at all. So I don't listen. But one thing they did say was they're arguing about how they didn't think it was fair that big play VA was being put in these third and short situations. They thought it was ridiculous that he's the guy. Usually it's second string, even third stringer sometimes being put in that. I think forget about that. It's the O-line they should be the most worried about. He's not going to get hurt nearly as much on those plays as he will be, you know, when he's getting pretty much sacked multiple times a game. But now they get to play at home. They go from playing in Toronto, get to play at home, a place where they've played exceptional football. You said it to me. I mean, you're going to the games, ticket holder. You don't want to bet against them when you're at home there watching, but of course sometimes you have to do it. We'll get to that game here in a little while here, the Calgary game. But I think that for me, when I look at that game, it was a wacky game all over. I mean, a lot of mistakes, a lot of turnovers, fumbles, interceptions. I think that their offense can be better. I think Toronto's offense is better than what people thought they would be overall, which is why I think we're seeing BC get so much hate right now. But when I look at BC, and I'll pull up some of their numbers here because I wanted to mention this. I was a bit surprised by their run game. You know, Stanback, 11 carries, 35 yards, and then Vernon Adams Jr., 8 carries for 25 yards. I think they need more from Stanback. It's going to be such a key for BC this year to be able to establish the run. I mean, I think, honestly, way more than even in the NFL. With this being a 3-down league, you need to have a run game in order to keep defenses guessing. I mean, look what was going on even with Winnipeg, and they've got Brady Oliveira. Once they realized that Zach Collaros was stepping back every time, probably the most, well, let's be honest, I wasn't going to say unathletic quarterback, but he's the oldest, and they know he's not going to move and scramble too much. They were blitzing him nonstop. So, yeah, I would say that Stanback's really important to the team.
Yeah, 11 carries. That's about double of what they were giving Mizell last year. So that's a big improvement. They basically never ran the ball last year. So when you have a player like Stanback, he is still one of the best running backs in the league, I think. You have to use him. And in terms of that third and short, these guys on the TSN panel, I'll admit, they know more about football than me. They just don't know more about betting football.
Right.
So I agree with them. I think that's I don't think that's a great idea to have VA doing this third down sneaks. You saw what happened with Bo Levi last year. Ridiculous. Why is he on the field? They're basically just taking a knee with 1 yard of space to go, and they're trying to shove him forward. He's out for the year. So
yeah.
I think you have these guys. Maybe you don't need to waste a quarterback position. You saw what Hamilton did with, I think it was Hamilton that had Litre go out for that. It was a trick play, but he was the guy who took the sneak for them. I think it's kind of ridiculous to have a quarterback just on your roster for sneaking.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Bombers, I guess did they not pick up a third to go behind Streveler or wherever Prukop ended up landing as well. I think it's wild to have 3 quarterbacks on the team and one of them is just there to sneak the ball. I think your fullback could do that, and everybody likes to see fullback touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up Streveler's name because before we jump into week 1 and give out some picks here, I want to see him used a little bit differently. This guy didn't come back from the NFL and come back to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers to be a 2-3 yard guy. He had a couple of good rushes, but I wouldn't mind seeing him toss the ball a little bit. And I don't think it takes anything away from Collaros. I think that we all know who the number 1 guy is. I don't think Collaros would be offended if he had to see Streveler toss the ball 1 or 2 times. But one thing I agree with the commentators said in their game last Thursday was, we know what's going to happen every time Streveler goes out there. And sure, he's a big guy. He can find the open holes. But at the same time, if they let him even just step back and throw a slant, I think it keeps the defense guessing a bit more. Do you disagree with me, or what do you think?
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Streveler wasn't all that he was cracked up to be, even in that championship run. He did look good in a fur coat, but Collaros won that Grey Cup for him.
Sure. But is he going to be the guy that just is because you mentioned a third guy for them? It seemed to me like he was
Prukop is on Edmonton signed Prukop, which
okay.
That's the only team that I think shouldn't, because they have Trey Ford sitting on the bench now. So
the only guy that shouldn't have done it. Yeah, they got a very mobile quarterback that can get the job done. All right, enough about last week. That's in the past. Let's get to this week, and we're going to pull up everyone's favorite public sports book. DraftKings. Here we go. We got Winnipeg, Ottawa week 2 action. Montreal, Edmonton, Calgary, and BC, and of course Saskatchewan and Hamilton. All right, we can start in order, I guess. Does anything stick out to you in the first one?
Not really. I was hoping to see these Bombers drop a little further, but there's a lot of public support for them, regardless of what you hear in terms of media coverage. So it's always great to have a bet in your pocket against the Red Blacks, but I don't have one right now, and it doesn't look like I'm going to have one the rest of the week. I think the line should be right where it is at 6.5.
Something I find interesting, DraftKings and FanDuel, Caesar, some of those books, all 6.5s. But then a handful of the sharper books I would say I trust for what it would be for CFL at least, including Pinnacle, still holding a -7. So it's always interesting to see when a DraftKings or a FanDuel makes the first move before a book like Pinnacle Usually Pinnacle, Circa, those type of books are the leading indicators that make the moves, and everybody else follows. But we're seeing FanDuel and DK go down to 6.5. So depending on what side you want, I think it's worth shopping around there. We have seen some 47.5s as far as that total, but then it's kind of bounced back to 46.5. We always call week 1 overreaction, or week 2 overreaction week. So you're going to see a lot of people wanting to bet against the Lions, bet against the Blue Bombers, bet on the Montreal Alouettes, right? And a lot of times week 2 is where people get crushed because they're so excited from what they saw in week 1. So to me, it would be Bombers or pass in this one. I think that we're going to be able to make money on the Red Blacks later on in the season. I think the Bombers can win by a touchdown. I think if you can get 6 in the hook and not have to deal with 7, I think that's a good bet to make, something that's worth, I think, jumping in on. Because I do not think it gets any lower than that by any means. And I just think overall, it definitely hurts the Winnipeg Blue Bombers that they didn't have many of their starters going at it in the preseason. People cannot say that doesn't help for some of these guys. And obviously, they've got the injury, but they still have a deep wide receiver room. The O-line did look a little bit shaky, but this is the thing about Ottawa. Sure, their offense might have gotten better, but I would argue that their defense, they made a few changes, sure, trades. They drafted a ton, but how long does it take draft picks to make a difference, especially in a league like the CFL? Sure, they had the week 1 bye, but I'm not buying the week 1 bye and extra film. I mean, if you're Ottawa and you saw your schedule get released, and then you see Winnipeg lose outright at home in week 1, you're probably dreading playing a pissed off Bombers team. So I will go out and say that Winnipeg was a side I thought would be really hungry early on in last week's game and, have some vengeance over the Alouettes, but especially here in week 2, I think 6.5 is a number that I'd probably jump in on. So I'll make that a play here for the show.
Ottawa's got a lot of injuries. I couldn't believe for a team that's off a bye to start the season, they're still signing defensive backs today.
Yeah,
their injury report, it has a lot of names on it. Defensive back, defensive lineman. So I'd say they're a little bit of a downgrade already with those injuries. And like you said, I think the reports of the demise of the Blue Bombers are greatly exaggerated right now.
It's funny because last week we did talk about like maybe this is the year they drop off. People got better in the West. The East teams got better, but the overreaction has just been absolutely hilarious. And I get it. The overreaction makes sense. They did not look good. You and I both said it, but at the same time, 6.5 to me seems like a deal here for getting a team like this. Looking at last year, the number 9th ranked passing defense, giving up 5,304 yards, Ottawa Red Blacks through the air. Where do you find a team that loves to go deep, loves to put the ball through the air? I mean, Buck Pierce and the offense, this team, overall, O'Shea, I should say, and this team, I mean, it kind of bothers me sometimes how they love going deep so much, because when it works, it looks awesome. But when it doesn't work, it looks kind of sad. And did you find that last week against Montreal, they just refuse to pass short balls? They will not throw a 10-yard pass. It's like, it's exciting because when they connect on 1 or 2 of them in the first half, all of a sudden you're looking really good. But if they can't, and there were some big drops that they had against Montreal as well. But again, for people at home, Ottawa might have gotten better, sure, but this is not the team that they want to play overall. And looking at the rushing yards per game, the funny thing is Ottawa was actually one of the better rushing defenses in the league. So we'll see how Oliveira manages against Ottawa's rushing defense. But as far as their passing defense, to me, this just sets up for a great spot for the Bombers to have a day and also lean towards the over as well. So,
just one more thing that like, I don't know how long we need to talk about the Ottawa Red Blacks game here, but this is Drew Brown's going up against his former team. So
right,
I don't think you could have picked a worse spot for him to start off. So Another thing to keep in mind, I feel bad for those Red Black fans that I can't believe how many still go to games there. A lot of talk about how bad Edmonton's been at home, but aside from when they get to play Edmonton, Ottawa is pretty bad at home too.
That's a really good point about Drew Brown. I forgot to bring that up. And you look at, let alone playing your old team, playing a team that's going to know how you perform, going to know what you're good at, what you're bad at, going to know how to pressure him, how to read him. We'll be curious to see. We're doing this video here on X on YouTube on Tuesday evening or Tuesday afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada. And we'll see how the line moves throughout the week. So right now we're seeing 7s and 6.5 where we're looking. All right, Elks, Alouettes. We're seeing a 5 now at DraftKings. I did see as high as a 6 at an opener. Do you agree with the market here?
I thought the Alouettes would have a bigger adjustment. So this line last week, I think on Thursday, they had week 2 lines, a couple books where you could get some somewhat legitimate money down on. And this opened up 4.5 for the Alouettes. So this was a game I identified last week. I'm down on the Elks at 4.5. And then I saw the Alouettes beat, in my opinion, the best team in the CFL. And the Elks basically fall apart against one of the more middle of the road teams. So I thought there'd be a bigger adjustment here. That's only moved a half point or a point since the openers last week. I still think there's good value on Edmonton, but I'm surprised that this line isn't higher. I would have thought Montreal be closer to a touchdown. If we're going to have our overreactions, I don't think that 2.5 points of adjustment based on a big win and a big loss would be too surprising. So I'm relieved that my 4.5 doesn't look as stupid as I thought it would. I still like the Elks in this game. I like them all the way down to 3. So I think there's plenty of value there, and also maybe a little sprinkle on the money line as you see these underdogs sometimes win outright in the CFL.
Big time. But we will say, for people that are new to the CFL, there's a lot of wonky numbers, a lot of weird numbers based on the singles, the twos, just a lot of weird numbers. So a lot of people say, like in the NFL, if you have a +2, take them on the money line. But I will say, if you got a +2 opportunity, I wouldn't talk anybody off just being okay with taking the spread, because sometimes you will see CFL games land on really weird numbers. But of course, make sure you look at the money lines, work out the math, and figure out what you like the best out of that one. 47.5, the number. I kind of painted the Elks as an over team. As you mentioned, Saskatchewan and Edmonton, depending on what numbers people got, did get over in week 1. But I think the under could be a play here. I do think, though, I lean the Edmonton side, but I do think it could correlate Edmonton to the over, Alouettes to the under as far as the outright victory. Fajardo, look, the guy can pass the ball. I respect it. I think that it's easier when you have a defense making plays for you all the time. It can certainly help you out and give you confidence. But the Elks defense didn't look horrible last week. I thought that actually in the first half they did make some plays, and we'll see what Montreal's offense can do. Let's see a Montreal game where they don't get one interception. Let's see a Montreal game where they maybe create one turnover. And how do they do? Because they go from a game last week where they were dogs by a touchdown to now laying points. So I'm curious to see how this one goes. I'll tell you what, last week, live betting wise, I was able to get in the Calgary-Hamilton game, I was able to get live both teams. I got -7.5 on Calgary, +15.5 Hamilton. I got +15.5 on the Toronto Argos on Sunday. CFL is a really good league for live betting. And I know people try and stay away from it because you can really screw up your bankroll. But this, to me, could be a really interesting game to watch how the line moves throughout the game. If Montreal gets off to a good start, if Edmonton gets off to a good start, if we see a touchdown early in the game, do you jump on the live under? We'll have to find out. But yeah, Edmonton. Let me ask you this though: do you think that there's only one way that number is going to continue to go, or should we expect any buyback for Edmonton? Because when I look at this one, I'll pull up my odds screen right now. As far as Edmonton's concerned, I mean, I kind of think that the odds makers are really only going in one direction. We're seeing only a handful of 5.5s left, and we're seeing fives at a lot of places. I don't think it's going to get back to even 5.5. Definitely won't get back to 6.
Yeah, this one's like, again, it's surprising to see. Like Montreal with a big win, Edmonton an epic collapse, and we're almost going right back to where the number was before week one. So, uh, like you said, these numbers, there are key numbers in CFL, not as many as in the NFL. 3 is always a key number, but as far as I can see, the second most common number in CFL scores is 1. So uh, you're not seeing those 6s and 7s meaning as much. There's more 1s, there's 2s, these rouges, these safeties on missed field goals. Those aren't as common as you'd think after week one, but yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about going from a 6, a 5, a 4. These 4s and 5s are more common than you'd see in the NFL.
Calgary, BC, I don't have a ton on. 50.5 we're seeing as the current total. I saw the opener at 51. I saw an opener for the point spread at -9.5. I see one book with a -7, some with 7.5s, and the majority at 8 or 8.5. So it's real spread out. But the moral of the story is we did see an opener at 9.5. I'm tempted to bet on this point spread here for the BC Lions. I kind of want to go ahead here and go against the move for probably what I would say would be the first time for me all year. Obviously, we're only in week 2, but I kind of want to see if this number gets bet down anymore. If I could end up getting a 7.5, I actually might lay it. I know it's hard to believe with the offensive line, with some of the defensive stuff, but you have to stick to your guns. And to me, this is the stick to your guns play of the week. It really is. If I didn't like Calgary that much going into week 1, how can I look at the week 1 performance and be like, okay, I've changed my mind completely? Everything you learned through your experience of handicapping, especially football, a sport they play once a week, is that you try not to completely change your mind from one week to the next. So to me, this is the stick to your guns play of the week. If I get even more value, if I get a -7.5, I get to lay the 8 even with BC at home. It might be a bet that's worth taking. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I like that this line's come down. If this line comes down a little bit more, I'd love to be on the Lions too. These Lions at home, these home openers, I've been to the last few, and you feel pretty stupid with an Elks +3.5 or a Stamps +9 or Argos +6, and you think you got a great number, and then BC wins by 40, and you have to drown your sorrows in $17 pints. So I hope I don't have to have a Stamps ticket in my hand. I don't think I will unless it goes up to double digits. But if it comes under a touchdown, I'd love to be on the lines as well. This line again, I like where it is. The only one that's really weird for me this week is that Elks line. I think it's off by at least a field goal.
Saskatchewan Hamilton. This is the one that I thought maybe you and I were meeting at center ice with this one and being head to head, but maybe not as much. We'll find out. But we got the number 1 rushing team against the number 1 rushing defense team, but Hamilton -1.5 home favorites at the Donut Box at Tim Hortons Field. Bo Levi looked okay. James Butler looked great. The defense is what I am the most concerned about with Hamilton. And again, Saskatchewan, they got the win for us. 21 points in one quarter, though. They'll have to be better than that throughout the first 3 quarters. And I think they will be. I think last week's win or loss, I guess, over Calgary is going to end up being a lot bigger than people think. They needed to get that first win, I think, out of the way because their schedule isn't easy for the first 5 weeks. I lean towards Saskatchewan here. What do you think?
I'm leaning towards the Tie Cats. I wouldn't take him at 1.5, but this is that sort of a weird number where you kind of attack the money line. So I've seen money lines down to like -107 on Pinnacle. A couple books have Tie Cats +1 at maybe 120. I don't know if I want to pay that much juice, but If I can get a one for the Ticats, I'm definitely jumping on this one. Like I said, it's a somewhat important number in the CFL. No game's ever going to end in a tie, but it's nice to get that little push if it's a close game and you think you're on the right side. So I'm waiting to jump on Hamilton here, not just yet, not at the what's the money line on our friends at, well, they're not our friends at DK 122. I wouldn't jump on that just yet, but it looks like this is trending down. There was a lot of rider money last week, and if there's the same thing happening this week, I'll be betting against them.
It's going to be interesting to see how the numbers move. I'm really happy with the idea, and credit to you for pretty much naming the day, Tuesday being our day here on Coast to Coast. So we got far East Coaster, a far West Coaster here, breaking down CFL. And guys, make sure you find us on X, on YouTube, McGinnis Picks, my YouTube channel, breaking down these CFL lines. I think it's going to be fun each week, reacting to the week before, talking about our winners, talking about our losers. Hopefully there aren't many of those, especially as we keep this season going. And also, you can follow us on our social pages as well, tweeting out all kinds of picks. Bobby is always tweeting out picks, talking about the market. I'm trying to do some videos as well, tweeting out during the game. And maybe I'll start tweeting out some of my live bets because I made some money last week doing it. And I feel like even a game you don't have a strong opinion on before the game, you can end up making some money live. So any closing thoughts going before we head out?
If you're doing the live betting, the biggest thing, and you've said before, is have a bunch of outs. I think you need at least 5 or 6 books. I know that maybe not all 6 are going to have live betting, but if you have 3 or 4 live betting books, you're able to even just hedge between the two of them. Some books will be 2 points off. Some books will be trying to manually adjust their lines, and that's where you can really attack. Most of these are on an algorithm, but there are a few, and you can see them getting manually changed based on again that kid in the back on the computer thinking he's smarter than everybody else. So just have a few outs. Don't just stick to one book. Have a few options, and then always take the best number out of those.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Best of luck in week 2. Make sure you're following us on socials. You can see our handles right there below our lovely frame there. And until we see you next time, best of luck. Enjoy the games. That's it for Coast to Coast.